With no further ado then, I'd like to bring forward Bob to talk about his topic of gyroscopes inside the room.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning. All of us have seen these at one time or another, I'm sure. As a child, I didn't understand them, and maybe you didn't either. Hopefully by the end of this talk, which will last about a half hour, we'll all have a very clear understanding of what makes this thing do what it does. Most of this will be a show and tell with the demonstrations, explanations, and a little about the phenomenon, how this applies to riding your bicycle. And then if we have time, there's some other applications I'll bring to your attention. Incidentally, can you hear me well enough? You can, thank you. Okay, and then I have some questions for you. So riding a bike, most of us started at an early age. And you'll find out, whoops, went too far. You may recall that some of us just hopped on a bike and we did it without knowing anything about physics. But as Mike mentioned a moment ago, our brain took over very quickly. The gyroscope is based on momentum. All the mass in the gyroscope is rotating. It has speed and mass, which mass times speed or momentum, yes, mass times speed is momentum. And that applies to your bicycle as well, but on the bike you also have not only the rotation of the wheels, you also have linear momentum of the mass, your mass, plus the mass of the bicycle. The first demo I'm going to show you is that the gyroscope reacts at 90 degrees to the force that's applied. So I'm going to wind up this little toy, place it on the pedestal. Gravity will tend to pull it down, but the gyroscope will go counter 90 degrees to the force of gravity. Gravity is pulling down, and the gyroscope is going at 90 degrees to that. I'm going to use the same gyroscope to show you that when gravity is neutral, in other words, it's balanced, it'll go just straight ahead. And that's the front wheel of your bike, just going straight ahead because it's not tilted. However, when you tilt your bike, watch what we call precession. It'll rotate about this axis here. Again, gravity is pulling it down, but the rotation is this way. Now, if I reverse the tilt, it'll go in the other direction. So far, the magic is clear, right? Okay.
Well, then on our bikes, why don't we do that?
You
Because
do.
we've got two wheels.
You do. You
But
do.
we-
Both wheels do tilt, do curve.
Okay, but it doesn't make me go around in a circle like that.
Well, it makes you go in a curve. It's a big circle.
That's why I keep my hands on the handle.
Oh, yeah. You're in control. Okay. Precession, it's like a top, and I illustrated that just a moment ago, where you saw it spin around. Incidentally, the Earth has precession, probably you know, that precession is quite long, though, 26,000 years to go around once. Pardon me?
Could you repeat that?
Okay, the Earth has precession. It rotates like a gyroscope, but it takes 26,000 years to go around one cycle.
Around what?
Around its axis. You have the plane of the Earth, the plane of the Earth going around the Sun, and then the Earth is spinning, and as it's going around the Sun, it takes 26,000 revolutions when the axis of its own North Pole come back to where it was later.
It means that the North Star changes over time. Every
26,000 years from now, there'll be a different star that's the North Star, because the pole of the Earth is slowly rotating.
Right.
And 26,000 years from now, it'll be the same star.
Right, yeah, 13,000 years from now. Good point.
Okay. I'm going to demonstrate to you the effect of gravity. First of all, I'm going to wind up one of these scopes and just let it go on its own. Then I'm going to add a fishing weight to one of its poles and see what happens to the precession. And then I'm going to lift one end of the gyroscope, and it's still going around on the pedestal, and you'll see that it slows precession or stops precession. So first we'll take it as it's normal under the gravity of the Earth. Very nice. That's about how long it takes to go around once. Now I'm going to add the weight to one of the axes, which in effect is like increasing gravity. It goes much faster. Gravity in this case is pushing it down even faster. Now if I can grab this thing, I can't grab it. I got one of those, my finger. I'm going to take another one just to illustrate that I can stop precession by pulling the gyroscope up. Okay, here's the normal precession without a weight added. I'm going to grab the string, grab it with the string, and you can see I can stop the precession, or if I pull the string up, it'll go in the opposite direction. If I release it, gravity takes over again, pull up, it will go in the opposite direction. So gravity is... Don't worry about it. Okay, here we are going back to Newton's laws.
Can you say what causes precession on the Earth?
Yeah, no, not on that one. That's beyond the scope of this course. But I will tell you what causes precession on your bicycle wheel.
Okay. I'll settle it.
That I can figure out. If there's someone else who can figure out the precession of the Earth, I'd be happy to learn about it myself. Okay. Newton's law, every force of a body in motion remain in motion and travel in a straight line until acted upon by another force. I'm going to take the pointer here. And then for every force is an equal and opposite force. And a force can be broken into components. Look at these springs here. These are springs under tension, but in equilibrium. They're held in place by little stick pins. And I've superimposed upon each of the springs the force that each one is exerting against the others. So for instance, this spring on the left is pulling to the left. These springs are pulling up at an angle, this one's pulling down at an angle. And for equilibrium, this spring has components. So for instance, its component is directly opposed to the force on this spring. And this component of that same force is opposite to the force exerted by this spring. So they're in equilibrium, but the point is that you can take a force and break it into components. And here's another reminder that the gyroscope will operate move at 90 degrees to the applied force. Let me demonstrate that with one of these. Okay, so if I push on one axis and pull on the other, it tips at 90 degrees. Conversely, if I do it the opposite way, again, operates to reacts to 90 degrees. This is a review of breaking a force into its components. So, for instance, this gyroscope wheel rotate in this direction, every one of its particles of mass has a component which we can break up into whatever angles we want, but it's most convenient to break it up at 90 degrees. So this particle is moving in this direction, but it also has a vertical component and a horizontal component. Let's talk about the bike, which that's my bike on the lower left there. Before I just took up motorcycling, I did a little research in the library about a book. And throughout the book, he said, if you're going to turn left, push on the left handlebar. I thought that was a misprint. But he repeated it throughout, so it's not a misprint. Conversely, if you want to turn right, push on the right handlebar. In other words, steer left. The term is called counter steering. So if you want to go that way, you steer that way, momentarily. Not for long, just to get your bike off balance. The gyroscope became very important to me when I took my first trip west, traveling through the twists and turns of the mountains. Most of my training was done out here in the Midwest, where the roads are straight or just slightly curved. And I ran myself off the road almost a few times. That's a hard stopper.
Is that true on pedal bikes too, or?
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, just to interrupt. When you say the right handlebar, you mean the right as if you're riding, not
Your
your
right
right
hand.
hand.
Yeah. Use your right hand.
And
If
if
you
you're pushing down or you're pulling?
No, just straight ahead.
Push
Just tilt the wheel, the handlebar this way.
Okay, so if you want to turn right, you're actually turning the wheel a little bit to get it off.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And the purpose is to put yourself off balance momentarily to get you going in the desired direction.
To get the tilt in the desired direction.
Tilt, yeah, exactly. The tilt in the desired direction. So let's review some of the things that a bike can do. What keeps the bike rolling upright, how to turn the bike, how to come out of a turn, and why a bike can turn even when the front wheel is pointed straight ahead. Okay, what keeps the bike rolling ahead? You, primarily. You're in control. And then there's the forward momentum of the bike and the wheels, which I mentioned earlier. Everything wants to go in a straight line unless disturbed. That includes the gyroscopic effect of the wheel. It wants to go straight. And then the caster of the front wheel, your bike has its fork is tilted forward, and at the end of the fork is a little notch, bending it even farther. This is an exaggeration of the caster on your bike. The fork, this is the fork, and in front of the fork, the axle of the wheel is even a little farther ahead. That tends to keep the wheel going straight. Okay, tilt the bike in the desired direction. This is the front wheel of the bike. Okay, we want to turn to the left. So what am I going to do? I'm going to push on the left. That causes the bike to tilt to the left, and you're on your way around the curve. Conversely, if you want to tilt to the right, push on the right, and your bike tilts to the right, and you start your precession.
So you do all of that subconsciously when you learn to ride.
Child can do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, now once in the turn, what keeps the bike from falling over? Well, the two things. One is the centrifugal force of the bike and you. When you're curving around, your bike still wants to go straight, but gravity is pulling you down. So here we have, this is an equilibrium. This is gravity pulling down, and this is the centrifugal force. You're going to the left, but centrifugal force is pulling you to the right, and they're in equilibrium because the gravity can be broken up into components. And this little component to the left, and then there's another component through the wheel down to where it hits the ground. And at the ground, you've got more equilibrium. Here's the wheel. Here's the pavement. Gravity. And this is the centrifugal force. Here's the pavement. So the wheel is exerting a force against the ground over here. The ground is pushing up. Also, the ground is, so you don't slip, the ground is pushing against the wheel. So otherwise, obviously, it's got some friction here, obviously. If there's no friction like on ice, the wheel will just slip right down. So again, we have this equilibrium situation.
How does that equilibrium work if the bike is straight up? If it's not tilted? What kind of centrifugal force when you have that?
Well, it's like the spinning this wheel here. When I was just holding, I let it go, when it was perfectly straight, the amount of gravity on this side equal the amount of gravity force on this side, so there was nothing to tilt it.
That's why the wheel has to be turning for you not to fall off your bike.
Mhm.
Okay, you come out of a turn. You just want to turn the opposite way or push the handlebar in the opposite way. So if you are going in this direction, you want to go to the if you're tilting, if you're going to the left and you want to turn, straighten your bike out, you push on the right and then, brings the bike up straight. Once again. You got a question?
So, Bob, I'm not aware of pushing in the opposite direction.
No one is.
So it just, we feel it internally and know what to do.
Exactly. Right. On the bike, it's easy, but on the motorcycle, as I said, I almost drove myself off the road because I wasn't aware of the effect of the front wheel of a motorcycle. Has much more momentum than the front wheel of the bicycle. And just a little nudge or a hard nudge on the motorcycle makes that thing really move to the left or to the right. And I didn't have confidence in that camera steering at that time.
It's counterintuitive, which can cause you to overcome it when you shouldn't. You should be working with this, but if you don't and you react badly, you misunderstand it.
Yeah.
Especially on a motorcycle, that's when you go off the road, you're fighting forces that you should be working within.
And I'm going to talk about leaning in a moment. I thought leaning, I was trying to lean the bike. It didn't budge. Leaning didn't do a thing. Okay, the precession of the wheels. As I remember the first slide I showed you when the gyroscope was rotating and I tilted it to one side and it was slowly rotated to the right, the same direction as it's tilted. The same thing applies on your bike. Both wheels start to precess, so if you turn to the left, both wheels make the bike go to the left. And the other thing is the shape of the tires make with the pavement is they form a little cone in contact with the pavement. Oh, here's the precession, we already covered that. There's the demonstration I showed you of tilting and it rotates or precesses. So the wheels, bigger wheels make a bigger cone shape. But because of the force against the pavement, you have in contact with the pavement at the apex of the tire, you have a larger circumference, but at the edge of the tire, you have a smaller circumference, which makes, in essence, a cone. A cone, this is exaggerated, of course. And the cone causes the bike to, let me just point out something over here. We're tilted to the, in this case, we're tilted to the left, so this part of the cone is closer to the radius of the circumference of the circle, and this part of the contact making with the pavement is larger, therefore you have in the shape of a cone, this or like this. This is another illustration of the same thing. This is the center line of the wheel in contact with the pavement. The higher point of the tire forms a circumference which is larger than the contact point of the inner part of the curve. And it forms a little cone. The bigger the tire, the bigger the cone. I'm going to illustrate this to you by turning the earth. Here's the caster wheel. Notice the curve of the wheel is round just like a tire. I'm going to, first of all, just drive it straight and nothing happens. Now I'm going to tilt to the right and the earth will rotate to the left. Straight. Now I'm going to tilt the bike to the left and the earth rotates to the right. You want to see it again, Sally?
No, that's okay.
No, we don't want anyone to go out of here with a question. Here's the tire of the bike, it's curved, and rolling straight ahead, of course the earth just stays in place. However, if we tilt our bike to the right and roll our bike, the earth will rotate to the left. Conversely, tip to the left, and the earth rotates to the right.
How about that?
And that's due to the cone shape of the
the
tire
ramification
makes.
of that when you're riding?
Say again, please?
What's the ramification of that when you're riding?
Oh, that helps you with your turn.
You can turn
Just
your
tilt,
like,
Yeah. Besides precession, the cone also causes the bike to go around. So essentially what I'm saying in conclusion that if your bike is pointed, if your steering wheel is pointed straight ahead and you're tilted, you can still go around the curve.
But if you're going really slow, it's going to be harder.
Oh yeah, you've got to have some momentum. Momentum is what keeps you up. Momentum of your body and the momentum of the rotating wheels.
Except in my brain, if I'm making a tight turn when I'm bicycling, my brain says slow down so you don't fall over while you're making the turn.
Yeah, unless you want to tilt way over on your side. Most people don't.
The interaction between the tire and the concrete is not oval like you have it. It's largely flat in most tires. And so you don't change, you don't get a cone when you tilt because you're simply moving along the same axis as a flat tire.
Yeah,
Tires are
automobile is flat. The automobile tire is flat. So you don't get that cone shape.
You don't get a cone.
No. This only applies to the bicycle tire, motorcycle tire, and casters that have a circular cross-section. Leaning to one side or another. Well, does leaning initiate a turn? Yes, if the center of mass changes. No, if the center of mass remains the same. Does the center of mass change when leaning? Well, on my motorcycle experience, the answer is no, but let me demonstrate to you based on a few of these tries. I'm putting one foot in front of the other, so I'm lined up like this way. But I'm going to tilt my body one way or another, and after dozens of times, it doesn't matter which way I tilt, I will go one side or the other. So if I tilt this way, okay, this one I happen to go to the left. In some cases, I'll tilt this way, and then I'll fall to the right. And so my conclusion is tilting, the bike does not initiate a turn. If some of you have different information, I'd like to know about it. Now, here's a summary of riding the bike. Keeping the bike upright, the operator is control and both linear and rotational momentum help keep the bike upright. Rolling straight ahead, the caster of the front wheel helps. That's that angle, the front wheel fork. Turning, precession of the wheels and a tapered footprint of the tires in contact with the pavement help make that turn. And my conclusion is tilting your body does not initiate a turn. Now here's some applications. Well, I don't know the details, but they're used in all these devices. Here's one I want to demonstrate to you. It's called a Gyro Compass. Invented way back in the 1800s by some German physicist or scientist, and I think produced in this country by Mr. Sperry Gyro Compass. What this does is the axis of the gyroscope will align itself with the axis of the Earth, the rotation of the Earth. It doesn't operate very quickly, but it's very accurate because you're getting true north. So what I'm going to do is spin this. This will be the gyroscope, the gyro compass. And I'm going to rotate slowly as though I were the axis of the Earth and watch what happens to the gyroscope. It aligns itself with the axis of the Earth. And this is at the equator, incidentally, because I'm halfway. This is the equator. Now what happens if you're at the poles? Okay. Again, the axis of the Earth, I'm going to rotate, watch what happens to the gyro compass.
You can do it.
So, now the question is, what will happen at 45 degrees? Well, let's try. Here's about 45 degrees. Likewise. And it doesn't matter which way I rotate. This way or that way. It'll still align itself with the axis of the Earth. I have some questions for you. What will be the relative precession of a gyroscope on the moon compared to on the Earth? So will it be faster, slower, the same, or zero? Someone says slower. I agree with slower. There's less gravitational force to pull the gyroscope down. What will be the relative precession of a gyroscope in space where there's no gravity? Relatively no gravity. Zero. Okay. Which of the following factors contributes to the turn of the bike? Please say all. Okay, now here's those of you who are or were pilots of small airplanes, that is. What happens when this is the propeller of the airplane, and there's gyroscopic effect. The pilot wants to change the direction he's flying. Okay, let's see. He wants to fly up. Watch what happens to the spin out. So the plane's going to veer to the right. And if he wants to fly down, go down, goes the opposite way. He'll veer to the left. Let's get a little more speed here. Okay, now if he wants to turn left, the plane will tend to go up. And conversely, if he wants to go down,
Go right.
go right, thank you. The plane will go down. So he has to take that into account as well.
Will that be the
think it only has to do with
It's
the
just
direction of the
gravity, yeah.
propeller spinning.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
You could, if you had the propeller spinning the opposite way, you get different results.
Yeah, but most propellers go this way. Clockwise from the back of the airplane, from the back of the motor, looking forward.
Otherwise, pilots would have to learn to fly again every time they do.
Okay. And here's one regarding the car. Now, we know the car has flat surface in contact with the pavement. However, what happens every time you make a turn? Okay, let's turn right, my right. Watch what happens to the axis of the wheel. It tilts. So the inside wheels of your car tend to want to lift off the ground. Same thing applies to when you're turning left. The inside wheels tend to lift off the ground.
Do you mean the edge of the wheel? The edge of the tire?
The contact surface becomes less.
So you get uneven wear on the tire, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you just went in one circle. But most of us turn both ways.
Okay.
Indy cars.
Yeah. That's the end.
We have more questions for Bob or thoughts about it?
So I've got something regarding the precession of the Earth.
Good.
So the Earth was early on in its history thwacked by something that caused the moon to form. And that thwack, or others like it that maybe didn't form a moon, but the early formation of the Earth were all kinds of bombardments from things from space. And those bombardments knocked its axis askew. And what we see is the residual effect of that now, with a precession period of 26,000 years. It's not there's no gravity in space pulling the Earth's axis in that regard. It's just literally residual conservation of momentum from being hit.
So it's got nothing to do with gyroscope properties.
I'm sorry, what?
It's got nothing to do with gyroscope properties.
Well, the Earth, the conservation of momentum and the spin in the Earth certainly is gyroscopic, but the fact that its axis is tilting and precessing, that is also a gyroscopic property, but the force that compelled that was a motive force of being hit by something, not the force of gravity.
Sir?
Also, they found that phenomenon on the guns when they started rifling the guns and make the bullet spin. Because before, at long distance, the bullet would deviate. But when it started spinning, they call it gyroscopic stability. It went in a straight line.
Exactly, so rifling the barrel.
Yeah, to make it spin.
It's a gyroscopic effect.
Yeah.
So it goes straight. This is more of a comment than a question. What's interesting about your talk is that it's actually very difficult to learn how to operate a motorcycle or bicycle from a physics point of view. You almost have to just experience it. And what this reminds me of is when I had my daughter learn how to ride a bicycle, we first took off the steering wheel. One of the first things she did was she was trying to turn left, and she went completely off of the trail into a ditch. And I think that was because, intuitively, she was actually doing what made sense until she experienced that it was counterintuitive, and over time that corrected for itself. But to actually learn all of this as a child, you just can't do it.
Yeah, it's not like driving a car where if you want to turn left, turn right, you want to turn the wheel right, but in a motorcycle or a bicycle, it's just the opposite. Just to get that device to tilt one way or the other.
So the logical, follow-on from that would be to take my grandson to an open place, try to get him moving, and then
Experience it.
just feel it, and, experiment. Yeah.
I've heard some parents or grandparents take off the pedals so the kid can just move along on the ground without having to also learn how to crank and brake at the same time. Just take off the pedals and kick and paddle himself.
That was how the original bicycles were made in the 1800s, with no pedals and no gearing. Yeah.
You remember that?
It was real
Harsh. I don't know if I mentioned it to the group about the man that gives science lectures, and he had a friend of his that is a welder, and the welder called him up and said, "Come over, I want you to try something." He went over to his place, and the man had welded some gearing up on the handlebars of a bike, so that when you turned left, the wheel actually went right. So it was just a little, and it was impossible to ride. This man takes his bike around the world and gives science lectures, and as part of it, he stands with $1,000 about 12 foot away from somebody who's volunteered out of the audience, and no one can get that 12 feet. It's so, your muscle, your mind memory is so tied in as to how to steer and control a bike, that these things are all done automatically and you can't really control it. He spent 8 months learning how to ride this bike, and it shows some amazing pictures of it. I think it's on my timeline on Facebook if you can get there. And he's trying, and in 8 months he could finally ride this bike. And so then he'd ride it for people, and that's all cool. And all that time, imagine how many times do you think he tried to ride his own bike? Never, right? And after 8 months, he went and he did a special thing. He went to Amsterdam and he met up with a bunch of friends there and so on. And they had bikes for him to ride. He could not ride a regular bike. So it's that muscle memory and that brain. The brain is an amazing thing. We should do more science stuff about brains, I think, and talk about that too. So just a very interesting thing. He has a son who is about 8, and in 6 weeks he learned how to ride the bike.
And you can ride both kinds, right?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. That would be pretty amazing.
How was the bike different again? You said that there was a...
At the steering handlebars.
Fulcrum.
There was the fulcrum of the lever for turning there, right at the center. There was a gearing there that just separated the hand. So when you turned this way, there was a rack and pinion gear thing, so that when you went this way, the gearing turned the wheels the opposite way. That's all it did. It was just an added-on gear that just reversed the motion of your action. So it was pretty amazing to see. I'll try to post it out. I'm not sure the best way to get it out so you can access it, but I'll try to put it available to you folks on my Facebook page.
If you send me a link, I can put a link to it on our video, our science, our humanist video channel.
Okay, yeah, if you're looking, you should be going onto the Humanists of West Suburban Chicago channel, and you can get a lot of these videos. This video, Bob agreed and allowed and wanted us to put it up there, so Scott's putting it up there, and hopefully we can do that with more of these videos too. Some of the things that we had from the past with Art's talks about water and things like that, it's a shame we didn't record them, but we're a fledgling group growing, so. Okay, well thanks, and whenever you feel that you need to go on to other activities of the day, that's fine. This is a very interesting video that I'll run for 30 minutes or so.
Thanks, Bob.